Hello, I'm Alexis. In this video we're going to discuss another interesting case of importing data from spreadsheets into BSC Designer. And that's one of the cases that we worked with one of our clients, the simplified version of it. Let me first introduce the data that we needed to bring to BSC Designer platform. So the client was tracking direct and indirect costs, and this was tracked across multiple perspectives, but for this video I used just two, planned and actual. For each of these direct and indirect costs, the deviation was calculated, as well as some other metrics, and there was also calculated the total like this here, and this was tracked continuously during the year. So there were data for January, February, and for each of the reporting periods the client had the cumulative data or year-to-date data, which was basically accumulating data from the previous months. Again, in the client's case, it was more complex and it was no longer sustainable to maintain all this in spreadsheets. So that's where BSC Designer came to help. And let's see how to do this. First of all, how I would approach it normally. How I would approach it normally if it's relatively simple case. I would create an indicator. I would put something in the current value field, like which will be actual. It's our actual, and I would put it here, the planned, our target, and that's it. We have everything set up. The progress is calculated and nice. In the client's case, it was not possible. One of the reasons, because it was not just two numbers that client want to calculate, more things to track. Another question is of how the data is represented. It had to be specific dedicated indicators for each of these, for direct cost, for planned, for direct cost, for actual. And there were more metrics that client wanted to calculate from this. So this simple approach was not possible. What we have decided to do, we had to reproduce the structure, but in a more structured way in our tool. So the total cost will be our container, and then we had here planned, and inside planned we would have direct costs and also indirect costs. Now let's start as a setup with this. The data, it's for January, so I select data here and we'll work with this. So it was 200 for the current value, and it was 60 for this one. What I see from the very beginning, the platform is trying to calculate for me the progress, assuming that I want to get to some target. In this case, that's simply not true. We're not trying to measure any progress, at least not this way. So one thing that I have to do, I have to mark that this indicator is raw data indicator. I do it here on the performance tab. As you see, when I do this, this progress is not calculated anymore. So the software thinks that it's just an indicator that keeps my data. So we have it here, the planned. I don't see that the value for the planned cost is calculated. What I want to see is, I want to see in this case, this sum. So let's see why the value is not calculated. I select planned and go to data tab, and I see that it's taken its value from the performance, and performance is logically not calculated because these two items are not generating any performance. So what I need to do, I need to change the way this metric, this container is calculated to the sum in this case. So that's it. Now it's 260. That's what we did so far. For actual, let's just copy and paste all this, and I will just rename it to actual and update with the data for actual 250, and here 50. Okay, checking that here we have 300, that's what we have here. And now for deviation, according to client's requirements, it should be calculated separately, so we need to do it this way. It will be deviation for direct cost. Let's call it direct cost deviation. What we need to do now, we need to reproduce this formula that is used here. So what the formula is? The formula is the formula is actual minus planned divided by planned. So let's reproduce it here. And yeah, the nuance here that if I click it actual minus, I will just actual minus. The software does not know what direct cost should it use. So it should be actual minus planned or what? Yeah. Let me double check. It's D4, so actual minus planned. So to make it more specific, I need to put here the name of the parent indicator. So now I know this actual direct cost is about this and planned direct cost is about this. And it should be divided by planned direct cost, I think. Yeah, we have. And to convert it into percentage, we'll multiply by 100. So that's what we have. The current value was calculated as 25% in this case. Repeating the same steps, I will make a copy of this. I will rename it like indirect, and I will change the formula to indirect calculation. It gave me 16.67, double checking with Excel. Yeah, that's what we have. Now the question is how this one is calculated. So it's not the average of these two. It's not the average. I see here average is 4.17, and that's not the average in this case. If I would need to calculate an average, I could do it easily here. I would put average and I have the same 4.17, but that's not the case. The logic of this Excel that we received from the client is that it should be calculated using these values calculated before. So basically in our case, it should be calculated from these two using the same formula. So let's do it. I will copy my formula, go to deviations. Right now it's configured to calculate the average of these two items, but we'll say no, we want to be this container 100% independent, and I will switch it to self-standing for this. And now I can formulate the formula, which will be, I remove this to adapt formula to point to the right items. So now it's 1538, and that's exactly what Excel calculates for us. Okay, so we did this part. And this part is actually, it's done automatically. I have here enabled my column Y2C, which stands for year to selected date. And I have now selected January, so nothing to combine. I see here the period that this column actually uses for calculation. So basically only January. How to do the next part, the February. Okay, in Excel and spreadsheet, we do copy paste. In the platform, we don't do this. We just switch to February and enter data here. Okay, I want to save some time, and I will just copy it, and I will ask AI, add this data to the February 2026, and I will just paste this data. One nuance that we're going to face right away, I have not commented it before to showcase it, what we're going to face. So let's first add the data. I see AI suggested to insert the data, and actually it's not the right way to insert it. So AI is trying to do what I was about to do in the beginning, to split the actual and target into these two fields. No, let's make it more specific. Import data into the value field only, not to the target field. Let's be more specific so that all the data, all these columns go to the value fields of specific metrics. Now that's preview is correct, so I will execute it. And let's double check first the current totals. So 400 for this, 400 for this, they're the same, this value we have here. Deviations 6 and 25. I see here the deviation is 6 here and 25 here, correct as well. And now this accumulated value. So what we see here is that we need to have the sum of this and this to have average, to have sum 520. But in the platform, it shows me something different here. See here 260. Why? Because this metric is configured for grouping for average. So basically it's averaging these two values and give it me here this final value. Not the thing I want to do. Again, to change this, I can go here and change it to sum of changed for all these metrics, but instead, let's again ask AI, change all direct cost and indirect cost metrics, change grouping of all to sum of changed. Again, what AI do, and we can do it manually, go here and change it to sum of changed. But I don't want to do it manually, so that's what AI suggested us to do. Everything is fine here, so I just apply these changes. First of all, let's see if they were applied. Yeah, I see they were applied. Now let's look at the Y2C. So 520, 140, and here everything is correct. The deviations were also automatically calculated here, 5.7, 7 point these values, and the total 6.06 is what we have here. The total costs, yeah, that's what we have here. So that's a benefit for doing this. If we go ahead with this very scorecard, probably one thing that I want to do is to clean up this interface a little bit. The progress column, for example, I can just modify, create a new profile, and focus only on the current value and Y2C, and removing progress column. Yeah, some things to make it look nicer, changing some icons. But in essence, that's what we achieved by moving this spreadsheet to BSC Designer. First of all, we automated all the calculations. The structure looks more tangible. Instead of having it in a table format, we have in a hierarchy format, so it's more visible. We don't need to manage this Y2D cumulative data. It's calculated 100% automatically here, as well as all these deviations. So is it more elegant way to do this kind of scorecard? Well, if it's that simple as we have in this video, I would think if it makes sense to move to specialized software, because it's just 3 columns and it's relatively easy to track. If it's more complex case, like we have to deal with client scorecard, yeah, in this case it makes sense to move it in a specialized software. And especially when you have other pieces of your strategy in the BSC Designer platform, so that you can connect them with your scorecard. And the last touch is to add some nice diagrams here. Like I can visualize certain metrics in some way. I can just visualize all the things we have and create, if we have some metrics that change over time, can even visualize on different on the same diagram different metrics. And obviously if we switch the format, we can visualize something more interesting. Again, if you want to play it with your data, you have special prompt for AI that will help you to generate new charts on the dashboard. So this you have out of the box, and also out of the box you have other things that you typically have on the platform to make it more consistent. You can just adjust measurement units if you need. You can assign owners if you need. You can update more evidence, more documents here. You make sure that things are under control. You can comment every of these change. And for the purpose of possible audit, you always have history of change that shows who did what, at what time, how it was done. So all the features and functions related to classical scorecard management. That's all that I wanted to share with you in this video. I hope it helps to see how the platform is useful, not just for the typical cases of strategic planning, but also for these cases where the focus is on the calculations. Thank you very much.